Forward. Halt. Left. 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 Right. Your left. 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 Right. Down, down. Down, down.
Arkansas boy with a lifelong plan took the oath like his old man, then turned around proud and shook his hand. L.A. kid stood right behind, took a deep breath and signed on the line, while tears streamed from his mama's eyes. They hopped right up on that Greyhound bus, swapping stories. They laughed and cussed, and they talked about the girls that they loved. They made a pact, shined up their boots, got the call before it hit the news. No clue what they were about to do. Ladies and gentlemen, Happy New Year. It is 2026. Can you dadgum believe that? I mean, this last year went by so fast. Welcome to the Finish This Fight Hour. This is the first edition of 2026, and I've got a great friend of mine I'm getting ready to bring on. I've got some of the coolest friends that I've made over the last several years through this patriot fight that's just beginning. Good Lord, what an amazing time to be alive. I hope your 2025 is good, and I hope your 26 is going to be even better. We've got a lot of challenges in front of us. We got a lot of news that's going on. Never really thought I'd be in this position to bring truth at such an intimate and deep level. And what I found when I came into this world about 7 years ago is there's very little that you can trust as being truthful. You can't watch the mainstream media. You can't do it. You're not going to get the truth. And I don't even care whether it's Fox or CNN, any of the mainstreams, because they're leaning and they're tainted. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, though, that's the same way. You can't just go to the internet and trust that it's going to be truthful. So how do you get to the truth? Well, the way I get to the truth is I go to a source of truth that is close to what I'm wanting to know about. And y'all, ladies and gentlemen, I have got a friend of mine that's a source of truth today. What do y'all think about what's happening in Venezuela? Venezuela, there's all kinds of thoughts. There's all kinds of emotions. There's all kinds of opinions. But we're going to get down to some nitty gritty right now. I want y'all to welcome with me an amazing friend of mine. She's an author. She has run political campaigns here in Florida. In fact, she's got the record for the most expensive campaign, not her campaign, but the most expensive campaign in the state of Florida's history was run against her and her candidate. She's also got a book. We're going to talk about that. There's somebody picking up her book and turning it into a movie. I think I might have a movie star buddy, or at least someone that's very famous down the road. Y'all say hello and welcome my friend, Debbie Faris. Hey, Debbie.
Oh, Glenn, what an introduction.
I do what I do. I do what I do when I can do it, and you deserve every word that was just said. And I appreciate you coming on today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So what do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about the big elephant in the room. First of all, let's talk about why you're qualified to even talk about this. Debbie, you obviously have an Asian look. You're Chinese descent. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Born in Panama. How in the world did that happen? We want to talk about that. Born in Panama, raised in Venezuela. So you've got a lot of experience in the country of Venezuela, and then educated in Mexico. Man, there's a lot of junk happening in Mexico right now too. Came to America, got married after coming out of college and having a little bit of a career. Came to America, had some children. You're a citizen of this United States of America. I think you've got a good reason to be able to be called an expert on what's going on right now. Talk to me about it. What's on your mind? What's changed in your life in the last 5 days?
Well, I have to tell you, it was extremely surreal to be in Panama, which is the country of my birth and where my family immigrated to, Chinese, 3 or 4 generations ago. So I was in Panama on January 3rd, on the 36th anniversary of Manuel Noriega being captured. That's when the Americans came in a few weeks before, but that's when he surrendered. So he was captured on January 3rd. And at the same time, the U.S. is striking Venezuela, the country of my youth. I call it that way.
Right.
I moved to Venezuela when I was 4. My family went there seeking tremendous opportunities. My father was the CEO of, well, in those days it wasn't called CEO, but he was parallel to that, of one of the largest industries in Venezuela. He was a known who's who in the executive realm. And so that's where I grew up. Eventually, we became citizens of Venezuela.
Mhm.
So I can tell your public, your viewers, that Venezuelans have been praying for this strike for decades. My family left Venezuela in the 1990s when it was already getting very dangerous.
Right.
But subsequent to that, the whole democracy fell. Chavez, who won first election democratically, then went about ensuring that he would remain in power. So that's what I tell everybody. It takes one vote, one election to get you into socialism, and
Right.
a decade and a revolution and the United States to get you out of it 25 years later, 25 years or so later.
Well, see, that's the first I've heard about Noriega and Maduro having an anniversary together. Going to be having an anniversary together. That I never put the 2 and 2 to place. That's interesting. It's also interesting that you just talked about one election, bringing socialism in, and now it's got to be rooted out. My gosh, what just happened in New York?
Well, the New Yorkers will learn the hard way. Venezuela, when I was growing up in Venezuela, it was in the top 20 economies of the world. People that were secretaries, and I don't want to diminish anyone that was a secretary, but the salary of a secretary was enough so that you could go to shop, take a flight to Miami and shop for the weekend. That
Really?
is how wealthy the country was when I was
Wow.
growing up. Yeah.
Wow. We don't have that here.
And since then, when I tell you it was one of the top 20 economies in the world, Venezuela was above Canada, above Australia.
Mhm.
And so Chavez takes over. It subsequently gets invaded by the Cubans. The Cubans, he got a lot of know-how from the Cubans on how to change the constitution so that he could stay in power. And then, I don't know if your audience knows, but there is a very prestigious university in Venezuela called the Universidad Simón Bolívar. They offer electronic engineering. Roger Piñate and his cronies were students of that university. They developed Smartmatic. Smartmatic was purchased Sequoia, and then eventually Dominion. Venezuela stands at the nexus of the election fraud all over the world. Over 60 countries have been affected, including the United States in 2020.
Right. So let's back up just a moment. Let's talk about Chavez. Was he elected or was he installed? And how can we talk?
So Venezuela had a 2-party system.
Mhm.
And in the 1970s or so, the petroleum industry, which before was operated by Shell and Exxon and Mobil and all the big, international U.S. companies, was nationalized. With that nationalization, then Venezuela takes control of its oil exports and refineries. The country, as I said, was very wealthy. Politicians were already corrupt, but then became extremely wealthy. And they failed to invest in the poor, the marginalized. In Latin America, you have very much socioeconomic stratas. You have the very wealthy. If you have a strong, robust middle class, the country survives. But what happened is that the middle class started to be hollowed up and the poor remained poor and grew. So eventually, people wanted change. Does this sound familiar? We
Oh
want
yeah,
change.
yeah.
And so I'll never forget, one of my best friends, her dad is from Romania, and he escaped communism in Romania and got to Venezuela. And when the elections for Chavez were coming about, he went to his friend's house. He would knock on their door at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night and beg them not to vote for Chavez.
Mhm.
And back then we thought he was insane. Well, Chavez gets democratically elected. Cuba gives him advice. He changes the constitution. I don't know the intricacies of those changes, but long story short, he extends his executive power and then eventually subverts the election systems. This is where Smartmatic and that programming comes in. And then he becomes dictator for life.
Was Chavez known
However,
as was Chavez known as a socialist prior to him being elected? Is
no,
that something obvious?
he tried to do a military coup. You see, Venezuela in the 1950s or late 1950s had a dictatorship, and they overthrew the dictatorship. It was a military dictatorship, and Venezuela had one of the first, if not the first, I want to say the first democracy in Latin America, having overthrown this dictator. So we became a democracy. We had this great tradition of democracy. Unfortunately, with that democracy came corruption. So and the military was supposed to stay back and just be, protection, armed forces, etc. He was from the military and he tried to overthrow the government. I don't know what happened in the interim. It didn't work. And then he came back again and postulated himself as a popular candidate. And that's when he was elected.
Okay.
Now, that being said, when Chavez comes in, he starts hollowing out the country in terms of the upper middle class, but he was very generous to the poor. The poor were finally receiving social services, food, refrigerators, whatever. So for a long time, he was very popular. He's considered a national hero. But the industry started to suffer. When you start putting your cronies in to run the petroleum companies, the electric companies, and the ports and all of that, eventually things are not done properly. And that's why Venezuela's oil industry right now is in shambles. They have a lot of oil, but they cannot refine it. When at one point, Venezuela was self-sufficient. So lots of complexity there.
What did the demographics look like? You talked about Venezuela being one of the top 20 economies and very affluent. What was the demographics? Were there a big gap between the rich and the poor? Was it a large middle class? What did that look like?
So the petroleum oil was discovered in Venezuela, I want to say in the 1913, maybe early part of the 19th century. And so that was, that's the beginning of the wealth of the country. Come 1940s, 1950s, you have the Second World War and war-torn Europe. So a lot of people that were escaping Europe came to Venezuela. The Spaniards, there were a lot of Spaniards, Portuguese, and Italians. Venezuela was a very welcoming country, and these immigrants came with skills and came with trades. And that was the beginning of your of the shoring up of your middle class. Then you had those that were escaping Lebanon. And I know there's a large Lebanese community in Venezuela and other parts of the Middle East. Venezuela absorbed those. It absorbed Jews that were also escaping from Europe. So it was a very culturally diverse society. And so you had those that were seeking better economic opportunities, those that were seeking, fleeing war-torn. And then you had people like my parents. I come from Panama. Panama was a very stable country. But my father was offered, I guess, an offer that he couldn't refuse. And so we moved to Venezuela for him to be part of the milk and juice industry. That's why he went there, which at that point, his company, the company that he went to work for, was owned by the Rockefellers. And
that's another rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But anyways, he went there for as an and then because of Venezuela's wealth, you had all the transnationals there. When I was growing up, we had executives from Johnson and Johnson and Kraft and Ford Motor Companies and General Motors. There were assembly plants, or if not, a lot of service plants there. So you had a very, very robust industrial base, and so that was why the country was so wealthy.
That sounds like a mini USA to me.
And better
Yeah.
than the USA. I would say better than the USA. My childhood was very privileged.
How old were you when you moved from Panama to Venezuela? Do you know?
4. I was 4 years old.
So that's pretty much what you knew growing up. I mean,
Yeah.
you probably have some vague memories of Panama, but most of your childhood was spent in Venezuela.
Oh, all my childhood was spent in Venezuela. I know Panama because my parents would make sure that I would go back to visit relatives in the summer. So I would summer in Panama and then go to school in Venezuela. So I know both countries
That's so
pretty-
funny because that's like me leaving Oklahoma to go to Illinois to visit my relatives. For you, it was a different country. You've experienced things that I probably most of us couldn't understand. There's a difference between state borders, or there used to be a difference between state borders and country borders. Now we're seeing states that are as different as countries are.
Yep, exactly. So you have a lot of commonalities in Latin America. Certain things, we all, most of Latin America is called Spain the mother country. Spain was what came to conquer that area of the world. So you have the common language of Spanish, same heritage, a religion, Catholic for the most, because that was the religion of the Spaniards. And then you have your idiosyncrasies by each region. But one of the things that Venezuelans were extremely proud of is the fact that the revolution, the wars of independence, just like the US was revolting against England, Venezuelans, inspired by George Washington and what he had done and the Constitution, did that in Venezuela. They wanted to, they weren't being treated the same. If you were born in Venezuela, although you were 100% Spaniard, if you were born in Venezuela, you did not have the same rights as someone that was born in Spain. So the Simón Bolívar is called the liberator of America, of the Americas, because he liberated from Spain, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Panama. But at that point, Panama was attached to Colombia. Panama was actually one of a Colombian province. So that's why Simón Bolívar is called the liberator of the Americas. And he waged war against the Spaniards in those 5 countries. So Venezuela in particular has a strong heritage of, constitutionality, civil rights, democracy, etc. And I think that complacency is what allowed what has happened in Venezuela to happen. My generation grew up learning all of these things in history, but unfortunately, when we should have been involved in the process of governance, we did not. Now, I'm going to say I got off scot-free because I had left Venezuela already, but those that remained in Venezuela should have been involved sooner. And instead, Chavez was allowed to grow, to change the constitution, etc. And then I don't know if this has been coming out in the national media, but after Chavez and with Maduro, you had the Cubans coming in, you had Syrians coming in, you have elements of Hamas and Hezbollah. Venezuela became logistic hubs for human trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, all kinds of black, under the radar operations. Venezuela became the hub. So when you look at why Trump invaded, the legal reasons are the same reasons why the US intervened in Panama. It's very parallel. Under, I think it's Article 2 or 3 of the Constitution, that is the legal basis for invading Venezuela, and parallel to Panama. So anyone that says that is not that is illegal, well, then go and posthumously convict George W. Bush, because it's the same thing.
Well, and a lot of presidents have. Before we dive off into the recent happenings, you just said something that's a very powerful word, and you said the word was complacency. I feel like that's where we have been for a very long time in this United States of America. Comfortable, complacent. I don't really like what just happened, but somebody else will fix it, to the point where now we're in danger. We're in absolute danger of losing everything that we grew up. You've been here for a good long time, so you can be included in this. But everything that I grew up just taking for granted was freedom. Well, I found out many years ago that this is not the country that I fought for. Yeah, this is not the country that I fought for. And freedom isn't really what I thought it was, or our freedom isn't really what I thought it was. Our freedom is definitely, it's definitely held in check by those in power. If they decide that we don't have freedom, it immediately goes away. That happened to me. And it's happened to a lot of people.
It happened to the J6ers. The J6ers. We just.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The thing is that this is such a large country that you don't realize it immediately until it's happening to you.
Until it's happening to you. And I hope and pray that nobody has to go through what I've gone through. Nobody has to go through what J6ers have gone through in order to wake up and realize we're in trouble. Now, maybe I'm just stubborn enough, or God needed to slap me down hard enough for me to be a big mouth and a big voice. And so it was something really critical that happened in my life. I pray that doesn't happen to any other people that I care about, or anybody really. But let's talk about, so Chavez came into power, democratically elected. Do you feel like he was already in cahoots with Cuba at that point, or did the communists see an opportunity when that took place? What do you think happened there?
I would imagine I don't know. I wasn't there. I mean, my family saw the writing on the wall. This is the thing that I would like the audience to understand. If you do not understand history, it's bound to repeat itself. Fortunately, when I was growing up, I was very young at that point when these decisions were taken. But I'll never forget, I was going to school in Mexico, college, and my parents were encouraging me not to come back to Venezuela. And it would have been the natural progression for me, because my dad was very connected. I could have landed a job anywhere I wanted because of that. But he was like, no, you need to find your way elsewhere. Why was that the case? Because they could see the writing on the wall, and it wasn't them. They had friends.
And you told me the story about your dad's eyes opening up. Share that real quickly if you can.
So a series of things happened. The first one was that he had two friends. One was Cuban and one was from Peru. And they told him, this is in the 1980s, 1984, something is going to happen in Venezuela. This currency cannot, the strength of this currency is not going to last forever. Get your money out. Well, we came from Panama, and Panama uses the dollar. So we had never experienced devaluations and hyperinflation and anything like that. So my dad was like, and it was very hard at that point to take that financial decision. I mean, the interest rates in Venezuela were really, really good. But then he had an executive MBA at Stanford University. He was here in the States for a few weeks in this, and he was surrounded. His peers were high-level executives from all of these big companies. And much to his astonishment, he realizes that his salary is the highest in the room. And understanding that, he realized something is definitely wrong in Venezuela. So as soon as he came back, he made all the movement to get all his money out. All that was left in Venezuela was our home, our vehicles, and our country club memberships. That was why we could leave, because we had the means to do that. They remained in Venezuela for several more years. That was in 1984. By 1991, I think it was 91 or 92, that's when they made the final move. Okay. And why did that happen? Because it had gotten so dangerous that on a Sunday afternoon at 4:00, thieves broke into my home. They held my dad at gunpoint, and they robbed our home. And that was the final straw. They left.
Was this a pretty common occurrence at that point?
Yes. So what was happening is you would hear of someone who knew someone that had been, assaulted. When I was in my last year of high school, one of my classmates died of a gunshot wound because thieves came into the home and there was an altercation and she got shot. So the circle starts getting closer and closer. First, it's someone that knows someone, then it's someone you know, then it's you personally. And that's how the circle starts tightening.
And
So
that's how.
we left in the my family picked up and left. I had nowhere to return in the early 1990s.
Okay,
At that
and that's how it does happen. It seems like. Was that just individuals deciding they needed money and going to rob, or was there a gang affiliation and thing like that? What was really?
No, well, the by that point, as I said, the corruption had taken place, had started to affect the social classes. The poor got poorer. And then you had a lot of just people that found it easier to make money that way. One of the schemes that they would have is they would go into a beauty parlor, they would lock the door, and they would just assault everybody there, just like that. Um, car theft was very, very normal. So, that's how I grew up, those levels of insecurity. And but we dealt with it. You just deal with it until it becomes personal. And this is not even when it got bad. When I talk to Venezuelans now and I say, "Oh, I used to live there in the 90s. We left in the 90s." Everybody says, "Oh, those were the best times." No, we
Wow.
left because things were getting really wrong.
Right.
But Chavez had not still had at when my family left, Chavez had not been elected. That came later. That came about 10 years later. Maybe not 10 years. I don't have the time right. But anyways, Chavez comes in, then the economic situation gets worse and worse. Then you have, first the professionals and those that could leave left. Then you had the ones that didn't want to leave, but they saw the writing on the wall. And so there have been waves of immigration until, unfortunately, the worst ones have been the ones that we have been experiencing here in the US, which are when Maduro emptied out his jails and prisons and mental institutions, and all of those people came over here.
Right.
So that's
right.
the bottom of the barrel. But unfortunately, all Venezuelans now have that stain on their name.
Oh yeah. And that's an easy stain to throw. And we as right fighters, if you will, as patriots, we've got the stain from a lot of negativity as well. So we can understand that. Help me to understand something. So the best that I've known about history with Venezuela was blaming the downturn on Chavez, but it sounds to me like it was already in a downward spiral. What was causing that? Where did that come from? Do you know?
Yeah, so no, what happens is when you have a political leadership that is in positions to, you offer a contract, you get a kickback, there's a privatization, you get a part of the company. There was all kinds of shenanigans going on from when I was, well, from when it was the good times in Venezuela. So that's what we know. The wealth of the country was pocketed by the politicians and their cronies, and that eventually got to be too much for the population and they wanted change. And
Debbie,
that's
it sounds like to me history repeating itself here in the United States. Maybe it's taking longer, not as short a period of time because we're a much larger population. I don't know. But the things that you're describing that you went through, Debbie, you and I are nearly the same age. So you've witnessed an awful lot in your short lifetime, Debbie. You've witnessed an awful lot in your short lifetime. We're taking longer to get there, but honey, we're in the same spot as Venezuela was pre-Chavez, maybe. And we have a choice. We can turn the train around or we cannot. Guys, if we don't, look what we've got to face. This America that we grew up with is not stable. We're not in a good spot right now. And it can only go down if we allow it to go down.
So I'm going to tell you from a geopolitical perspective, Trump is the best thing that could have happened to this country. It truly is nothing short of a miracle that he was able to prevail. through all that came against him and then make it for a second term. But we're not going to have Trump forever. Right now, the midterms are coming up, and the globalists and everybody that is very responsible for all of these socialist tides around the world, because don't kid yourself, it's not necessarily organic, will do anything that they can to derail the second half of this presidency. So that's why I am telling everybody that we have to get out to vote. We have to get out for the primaries and choose the right representatives, good people, vet them, and we make the choices in the primaries. And then if you're in a red county, vet for the primaries. If you're in and elsewhere, we have to turn out to vote for the midterms. And we have to make sure that he gets a majority in Congress and his majority in the Senate. Otherwise, we are going to be embroiled in both impeachment woes and in war crimes, war crimes accusations, as what's happening in Venezuela.
I'm going to agree. No, I'm going to agree with you, but I am going to make a disclaimer. I am not a big fan of the Republican Party, especially in the last few years. I am a registered Republican because it's the closest to the way that I believe. I don't even know that I'm a libertarian. I don't know what I am. I'm a God-loving, country-loving redneck that's sick and tired of the crap. And so the closest that lines up with that is going to be the Republican Party. But dadgummit, we got some folks, we need to spank their butt and kick them out and replace them as well.
And that's the challenge. That's why I say get involved in your primaries, because right now, the way elections stand is it takes so much money to get the name out of the right candidates. That's why you see people that you really don't agree with, but they have the funding. So right now, money is buying our
We're going through a glitch right now, Debbie. Take a look at, if you can see or hear me, just take a look at your internet. We're going through a glitch. I'm going to take my quick break anyway. We got about a 2-minute video that I want to play here. And I want to show you all what it is and why I do what I do. And we also have some really good news, some things coming into play. So I want you to take a quick look at this, guys. Hang tight. Here we go.
As I woke up this morning and looked out the door to a country I don't recognize. They put masks on our face to hide our pain, and there's no fire in most people's eyes. And it's still true today. It's still true today that they've tried to destroy the American spirit. And in some instances, they've done a dadgum good job. But in other instances, they have lit an inferno in some people. And we right now are gathering some of those people that are on freaking fire to save this country.
Guys, that is the reason I'm here today, is to help our wounded warriors, our wounded veterans, to be able to walk again. I've got some great news. Debbie's back on. She's waiting backstage. Had a little, let me give you a redneck term. She had a little Jill flirt in her internet and it froze her, but she's back on. I just got off the phone 2 days ago with the company that we're working with for the exoskeleton technology to be put on our veterans, and found out that it's in the FDA's hands now. They've still got some paperwork they need to submit, but they're expecting it to be approved middle of this year. However, it looks like my friend and my brother, Joshua Holm, who we took to New York in July, is going to get a chance to be a test subject. for the take-home model, which means that we're going to have him up and walking here in the next couple of months on a much more permanent basis. So I want you to keep your eyes here. Keep your eyes here, because we're going to keep showing you what's going on in that world. We've got some sponsorship that's taking place, possible big tour for the for our music, for the concert series that we've been talking about for a while. Some other great things going on. So I think we got Debbie back. Let me try to put her in really quick. There we go, Debbie. Let me put you on single. Hang on just a second. Debbie, you're back.
All right. I don't know where I left off.
I don't know how you just froze up. You look like one of those 80s music videos about technology.
All right.
So I think we were at that point talking about what had happened with Chavez, and let's kind of continue on into that, because we got a little bit of a limited time. We got about 30 minutes or so. It continued to spiral down, and this was after you had already left. Chavez came into power. How long was he the president of Venezuela? How long was he there? Do you know?
I don't recall. I know that he came into power probably in the late 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And then successively, what I do recall, probably early 2000s, I remember telling my friends, as the main TV stations, there were several TV stations that were very historic, and they started shutting them down because these people were reporting the truth.
Right.
And when the main one shut down, I remember I have a little group chat with my classmates, and I just said, you guys are heading towards communism. And one of them said, I think we might be headed there. And I'm like, when that shut down, I said, no, you are there already. But people did not realize it.
Mm-hmm.
So it got really bad in end of 2008 and then subsequent to that.
Okay. And then eventually Chavez died, and a bus driver who had become a general in the army named Maduro took over.
So this is what they do. Chavez, when he becomes a dictator, becomes, you have to hold on to power. So you either have those that are completely blindly loyal to you, or those that are not as capable. He gets this bus driver, and eventually, imagine, he's a bus driver and he now is a general. The thing that people don't understand about the structure in Venezuela is, you tend to think of the military, and you should know this better than anyone, Glenn. The U.S. military is a pyramid where you have, your base of all the soldiers, right? And then it goes kind of up, and then you have a few generals.
Right.
Well, I don't know where I saw the number. I don't know how many generals are in the U.S., but I think it's about 600 or less, 650 or less.
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela has 2,000 generals.
Wow. And a much smaller armed force.
Of course. What they've done is all these generals now control the port or the airport or the power company here or the, petroleum, whatever, somewhere else. So they all have these little fiefdoms. There are a lot of them, but they're not enough for one of them to effect a coup. So the military is ineffective right now in terms of secure. And the other thing that happens is you're a general, now you control this. Well, when you control, it's not that you're only patrolling. You are receiving the money that's coming in, and you are enriching yourself.
Wow.
So that is what is left right now in Venezuela.
So just to sneak a little into what recently happened, is that the reason that there were Cuban soldiers there when Maduro was captured?
Yes and no. So Cuba inserted itself into Venezuela very early on during the Chavez years, advising him at first as advisors, and eventually then they started taking prominent positions within the government. Cuba has subsisted off of Venezuela in the last 20 years. Cuba doesn't make anything. Think about, how does Cuba subsist in this day and age on an island? It's all because of the Venezuelan profits. So what was happening is that Maduro was offered opportunities to leave, but he had over 20 Cuban guards surrounding him. And their orders, he leaves, you shoot him. He's not leaving here alive. So
Wow.
if you look at Maduro, I almost detect a little bit of a smile on his face
We see that. Yeah.
because he's alive. He wanted to leave, but he couldn't. This was not a this was a rescue mission, if you will.
See, that's where we get to the point of as the world turns, this now becomes a soap opera. Before we jump into that, I want one other source of truth from you. So you were educated in Mexico. What was Mexico like while you were in school?
I loved it. I really have a soft place in my heart for Mexico. I lived there for 6 years, and, I went from Venezuela to a city that was 4.5 million, and I never felt safer. In
Which
Venezuela,
which city were you in?
Monterrey,
Oh,
Monterrey, Mexico. When I lived in Venezuela, my parents really didn't let me go out much because of the insecurity. So, it's always very guarded, very, chaperoned, etc. When I would go to Panama, absolute freedom. It was safe. When I went to Mexico, even though it was a very large city, I had so much freedom. We had freedom to do what most Americans would consider normal activities. So I really enjoyed Mexico, and we did not have the drug problem and the cartels that you have now.
okay. So that's really what I wanted to hit on. So let's bring it up to current now. Maduro was installed, if you will.
Mhm.
Even the most current election that took place in Venezuela, um, statistics say he lost handily, yet was still never replaced.
So I have a little bit of insight on that. In 2024, the elections happened in Venezuela. The presidential candidate was Maria Corina Machado, who just won the Nobel. Through a series of, I don't know the details, but they disqualified her. So even though she had won the primaries to run, they disqualified her, and so then or Maduro allowed a former ambassador, Venezuelan ambassador, his name is Edmundo Gonzalez, to
Mhm.
run, and then he and Maria Corina campaigned all around Venezuela. And then they implemented a system where they could capture the results of the votes as it was happening. Venezuelans from abroad helped them with the technology. There were people that risked their life to have the actual, I don't know, it's the tallies, the hand counting tallies. Venezuela has a 1-day election. So when you would go to a center where you would vote, the votes were tallied, and those real tallies were smuggled out.
Mhm.
So they did phenomenal work to prove that they had won the elections, but Maduro did not recognize it. He came out announcing that he was the winner. Um, you know, so he never recognized that win. But
Okay, so let's make one thing clear. When you talked about her, she was what's her name? I'm sorry again.
Maria Corina Machado,
Machado. So when Machado was disqualified, and you said they disqualified her, who is they?
the Maduro regime.
Okay, so the regime,
Mhm.
whether that's their governing force or him himself, maybe we don't know. But she was
No,
just,
through the legislature, through the legislate. I mean, when you control everything, you control the executive power, the judicial power, and the legislative power.
and
So,
you're speaking United States terms right now as well, because the parallel to that is in 2024, a election here in the U.S. Prior to that, how many states took Trump off the ballot, disqualified him? It was
yeah, yes,
several
yes,
disqualified him.
yes.
So again, you said early on in this interview that history, if we don't know it, repeats itself. It's happening right here in front of our eyes, y'all. It's happening. Venezuela is happening in the United States right in front of our eyes. Now we can look south about, I don't know, what's it, 400 or 500 miles and see the results, and we don't. We don't. Good Lord, have mercy. So you enjoyed it. I'm going to catch myself because I can get all wound up here, Debbie. So you enjoyed Mexico. You enjoyed your time in Mexico. You enjoyed your college time and the freedom to be able to go and do what you're going to do as a young person. Now let's forward to a few years later, 5 or 10 years, Debbie, maybe a little more than that later. Mexico has also now had a leader installed, and is very dangerous. I just saw today. There's in places like Puerto Vallarta and Cabo San Lucas, and there's places that are telling United States tourists, go home, get out now. It's getting ready to get really bad. Here's another place that was a beautiful place that's now corrupted very deeply. There's getting ready to be some things take place there. So let's talk about 5-6 days ago. Let's talk about January the 3rd. Let's talk about you were in Panama, and you woke up to the news, or however you found out that Maduro had been captured.
Mhm.
Tell me about that, young lady. Tell me what that felt like, and who you were around, what that looked like to you.
So I woke up, and the first thing, I woke up around 7, and I saw a message from one of my friends who's Venezuelan, and she sent me. She was up all night as it was happening. So it had already occurred, but that's how I caught up with what had happened. She sent me images of the strikes, just a lot of information. So that was very interesting, because that same morning I was taking my son to the airport. He was returning to the U.S., and we were driving through. Panama City sits on a bay. That bay at one point was swampland. It was mangroves, not swamps, mangroves. The mangroves, the actual trees were cleared, so you have a lot of muck and mud there. And my dad was telling me that when the Americans invaded Panama on to get Noriega, they dropped them on that, which would look like a beach, but it wasn't beach. It was like quicksand. So the soldiers were mired in the muck, and this area is the shore is covered in shanty towns, and so the poor people were running to the Americans, and the soldiers did not know if they were coming to, aggressively or not. Well, the Panamanian people were so excited that the American soldiers had landed, they were pulling them out of the mud and helping them. So it was kind of surreal to be there as this is happening in Venezuela. And then the next day, that same day, you had cars with Venezuelan flags just going up and down the city. So,
well, and that's what we're going to get to, because the left's head is spinning. There's protests in Washington and Oregon and Minnesota and DC, and release Maduro, you kidnapped him, yeah. They're so small, though. And I have even people that I know here in South Florida saying, I've not seen anybody celebrating this. Show me the truth. Well, we could show the truth. We could spend a lot of time showing the celebrations in Venezuela, in South Florida, in Miami, all across this country. I truthfully believe, on a majority and on the whole, Venezuela is ecstatic right now.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have all those images. I have friends. Okay, just so that people understand, I graduated, my class was about, that we can count today on my group chat, 30 of us. Of those 30, only 6 remain in Venezuela. Everybody else is in Australia, North Dakota, Chile, all over the world, several states in the United States. And so they are all jubilant, because a lot of these people that left Venezuela did not want to leave, but they had to. It was a matter of life or death. There's a story of this young man that was on a group chat, just like this one, but it was a dissident group chat. He did not even know his name was on it. Do you know that he disappeared for 1 year?
Wow.
Just because he was on a group chat that he had not even given permission to be on it. So this is the type of repression that happens in these regimes. Anyone that is saying they're not, that first of all, the protests here in the United States are organized and paid, and they're paid by the leftist elements and probably Soros and his cronies.
Sure.
Venezuelans are jubilant, but I will make this cautionary note. In Venezuela, there is not jubilation, because Venezuela is still a captured operation. You might have taken out the top leader, but you have a whole infrastructure that has been created and is very well organized and has been there for probably a decade. And if you come out to celebrate, you will be marked and and things will happen to you. So the
Mhm.
celebrations aren't that great in Venezuela because
Right.
people are still very afraid.
Well, and they need to be. And, you know, you've already given me some information that I didn't know, that Maduro was not allowed to leave. If he was trying to leave, he was going to be killed, which means that all we've taken is the figurehead.
Exactly.
We've really not taken the problem. Now that's the next situation, sis. The next
And
situation.
what I would, at the end of the day, what I would love, what I would like your audience to comprehend is that labeling Maduro as a drug trafficker and all of that, that gives the United States the legal basis to go in and do what they did. Same with Noriega. However, right now the rhetoric is, oh, we did it for the oil. We did it for the oil. Let me clarify this. Yes, we did it for the oil, but because that oil was being used to fund countries that are against us, such
Yeah.
as China, such as Iran, such as, the axis of evil. So
Yeah.
that's why the oil becomes strategically important to capture and to own, or at least have control over that. But
Well, and that's a domino effect too, because I just read the statistics this morning. Um, China gets 40% of their oil from Venezuela. They get another 35 to 40% from Iran. Iran gets their oil from Venezuela. If we cancel the Iranian oil, they no longer have it from China or Iran. And now China no longer can invade Taiwan. They no longer have the means to produce in the levels that they're producing.
And this is the thing that we have to geopolitically understand. This
Yeah.
is why this key element is so important. But in addition to that, what people don't know is that Iran was manufacturing. Venezuela was the grounds where Iranian drones were being manufactured.
Yeah.
There were industries there, and
Mhm.
when people say, well, we shouldn't get involved in nation building, I do not disagree. I don't like that whole idea of nation building. I don't even know how you would do it in Venezuela, but Venezuela is really close to the United States, so it is in our best interest to have a safe neighborhood.
It may be the most intelligent move that we've made when it comes to countries in the last 50 to 100 years, because we've never fought any battles close to our borders.
Nope.
This one would be close. I mean,
Close.
close enough that rockets can land and things like that.
Florida is only about 1,500 miles away from Venezuela.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Strategically, it makes a lot of sense if people would open their eyes to see what's going on. Now, Trump has just recently said that we're going to manage Venezuela until Venezuela can manage itself. Not a great big fan of that, but I don't think there's another choice. And here's the next big doo-hoo about what's getting ready to take place. Colombia is flaring up. Colombia is saying, we won't bow down to you. Well, guess what? They just installed a communist president in Colombia just a couple of years ago.
but he was elected. He was actually, I don't know if cleanly or not cleanly. That I don't
Maybe
know.
he was, maybe he wasn't, but it's still the same cycle that we're witnessing around the world. And he's absolutely communist, which means he's tied to the same people that Venezuela was tied to. Now we also have Mexico, and Mexico is this drug trafficking hub, but they're also allowing how many thousands of Chinese military age men came across the open border in the south between Mexico and the U.S. during the Biden regime. That was allowed by Mexico. So there's ties there as well.
Well, this
This
is the thing.
deep.
This is the question that I think people need to understand is that, we're looking at things from the local perspective, but really when you look at the whole planet, if you will, I believe that this stems from banking interests, truly, because at the end of the day, all of this nefarious activity, be that drugs, human trafficking, arms, whatever, these are illicit operations that get laundered. There's money laundering, and then that flow of money goes into banks. And I think that we need to pay attention as to what is happening in Europe. Why does Britain and the rest of these European countries are so intent on maintaining that war in Ukraine? Why are
Right.
they just so divergent in terms of our national security stated goals and theirs? They're basically saying, you know, the US supports NATO, but they want to continue the war, and the US is trying to pull out. So I believe that all of this is somehow connected. I think there are intense banking concerns. And I don't think that they are very happy with the Trump administration, which is
Well, that's no doubt about that. And there's several rabbit trails that we could take. We could do a couple of shows on just that.
yeah.
Uh,
So that's that. But what I want to focus on is the midterms, because that is for us to continue with this. I know you don't like the Republicans. I am no lover of what I've seen, but we have to understand the Republican Party is divided between the America First faction and the establishment Rhino faction. And we just have to make sure that we prevail. That's just how it goes.
and let me qualify when I say I'm not a big fan of the Republicans. I'm born and raised a Christian conservative. Well, that's really what Republican is supposed to stand for. The challenge that I see is that's not the truth in a lot of instances, and that's the part that pisses me off. Is we've been lied to on that point too. Now, if we were truly what they're supposed to stand for, I'm all in, baby. I'm there. But that's not the case, and we see that way too often.
Mhm.
Wish there was a way outside of a two-party system. Not going to happen. Maybe ever. Not going to happen. So there's sometimes when we just have to say, okay, this is what we've got to work with. Let's go use it and make it the best of it. And that's what we're going to do. Now, I will not support a Democrat. Absolutely not. Even if it's a good person that I care about and think is a good guy, you're on the wrong team 100% at that point. So there's some things that we need to really, maybe I need to learn. Maybe I need to learn from you, Debbie. But there's some things that have taken me to the point where I'm not real proud of how I'm registered, but I'm registered that way to be as effective as I possibly can. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. We're all in the same boat, Glenn.
Yeah. So let's go back to Debbie, because we got a few minutes and want to end up. Debbie Faris, you and I have been friends for several years. You've got a lot going on right now, and I want my people to know a little bit about what you've got going on. Let's talk about your world, how it's changed in the last year, and let me run up a little banner underneath you while you're talking.
Yeah, so as you know, I was involved in the most expensive political state race in the history of Florida. Over 20 odd million was spent against my candidate for a state race. So after that, which was quite traumatic, and I still need therapy. Anyone want to contribute to the Debbie Go Fund therapy fund? That would be great. So many people have asked me, can you be my campaign manager? I'm like, no, still PTSD. So I am helping candidates. I train them to understand marketing principles. That's my background, marketing and communications. If you're a candidate out there or you're thinking about it, remember you're a product, you're toothpaste. We need to learn how to sell you. But that being said, unbeknownst to me, the Lord is it has a sense of humor. And I wrote a book which details a lot of this background that I have. And that book is going to be produced into a movie. So
See, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you for that.
yeah. So now I'm learning the movie business.
Girl, I learned a little bit about the movie business in the last year myself, and that I'm just one of these guys. It's either brave enough or dumb enough, and I don't know which one it is. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. That when God says do something, I'm just like, okay, yes, sir, let's go do it. And I've learned a lot myself, and so I'm glad that I'm glad it takes all kinds, Debbie. You and I are great friends. Every time I call, you pick up the phone. Anytime you call, I'm going to pick up the phone. But we're built a lot differently. But we still got a lot of the same goals. And I want to tell my people that are watching right now, this is solid. This is a great person to get to know. Talk to me about Praying Mantis and where they can find that.
So writing is therapeutic for me. We live in very trying, difficult times. And because I have been involved since the beginning of the election steal in 2020, in this process, I've done legislation, I've managed political campaigns, all not really wanting to do it, but it was what the Lord had me do during that season. So after being at J6, I naturally, and with now you know my background, I just did not want to be out there, but I felt the truth was necessary. So I adopted the nom de plume, Praying Mantis. I am on Substack. That's where all writers go. But you can also listen to me on Spotify if you look for Praying Mantis. So I write articles that I feel inspired. It's not me that's writing them; they're just flowing through me. Whatever the Lord wants me to say to a topic, that's what comes out.
See, when you and I met, the Praying Mantis was a secret name, and nobody
Yeah,
knew who
no
Praying
one
Mantis
knew.
was. And for good reason, I think, because
Of
people were
course.
being evil right and left, you know.
Well, we didn't know where this country was going. Kamala could have, and then we would be on Venezuela on steroids. So no, I
Oh,
was secret.
absolutely. Y'all pay attention to what's going on in our world. I know it sucks. And people still say, well, let's just don't talk about politics. Well, guess what? That's where the war is. That's where the battle is. And if you don't educate yourself on it, you're going to wake up one day and go, how the heck did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening right in front of your eyes? Take a look and get to know what's happened in Venezuela in the last 30 years. Take a look at it. Learn the history, because it's repeating itself right in front of us. Now, we do have something that they didn't have. We do have a guy named, and I'm not super big Trump guy. I'm not one of these Trumpers. There's things that he does. I'm like, are you kidding me? But at the end of the day, when I really realized that this was the guy for the job, was when he came down the golden escalator, and I saw that everybody that had loved him before all of a sudden went on the attack. And I realized he's got cojones this big, and he didn't back down. And he began to fight, and he was not complacent. You know, we talked about complacency earlier on in the show. Complacency is absolutely the downfall of this country and how we've gotten here. And there's a quote that's been said many, many times, and hopefully I'll get it right. And I feel like we're in the middle of that right now, that hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create terrible times. I mean, it's a continuous cycle. It happened in Venezuela. It's happening here. Folks, we have a choice. We can sit on our couch and be comfortable, and we can just let the world crumble around us. But here's what I can tell you. Greatness has never happened in the comfort zone. Think about it. Greatness has never happened from a comfortable position. Our founding forefathers gave up everything, their wealth, their health, and their lives in many cases, to produce this country that's been the bastion of freedom. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. But God is calling out to people like Debbie Faris and old redneck Glenn Baker and thousands of others, and asking them and asking you, what are you willing to give up to make sure your children and your grandchildren and your grandchildren's children can be raised in a land of the free and a home of the brave? Because if you're not willing to give up something right now, it's going to be taken from you in the future.
And that's what I have to, that's why I did what I did all these years, because I am very grateful to this country. This is a great country. And I was widowed. I was a young widow. My eldest was 10, my youngest was 2 when it happened. And this is the country that allowed me to be able to advance these children to the point where they are today. It would not have been possible in China, in Mexico, in Venezuela, or in Panama. This is a great country, but we've got to protect it and defend it.
We've got to. And I actually just switched over to you so I could wipe the tears out of my eyes. I still love this country.
Yes.
And Debbie Faris, I love you, and I thank you for coming on the show today. Hey, finish this fight. Took a break in December, but we're back. We're going to be going hard over the course of the next few months. I'll have shows starting back up again next week. Put it on your calendar. Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern time is our scheduled time. I've got to fill my schedule up. If you got somebody you'd like me to interview you think is worthy of taking the time for an hour of your day, shoot me an email, shoot me a text, shoot me a direct message on my Facebook or on my YouTube channel, wherever you want to, and we'll talk to them and get it done. Debbie, any final thoughts, sis?
No, just get involved. Do a part. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just do something. And if anything, share with your friends the understanding of why things are being done. Get informed and tell them the truth, because that's where it all starts.
Get involved, y'all. Do something. Get up off the couch. It's your time to shine. This is Glenn, and I am out.
Forward, halt, left, 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 right, your left, 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 right. Down, 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 down.
Arkansas boy with a lifelong plan took the oath like his old man, then turned around proud and shook his hand. L.A. kid stood right behind, took a deep breath and signed on the line, while tears streamed from his mama's eyes.